Welcome, any and all, to the newly branded Views in Paradox, hosted by me, John Olson, and as always, my compatriot, Rochelle Racine.
Hi guys. Welcome, welcome.
Welcome. We just up top, a little housekeeping. We are still kind of in the midst of changing some things over. So the Facebook page still says Movie Club Collective. The YouTube page has been changed over to Views in Paradox. So, like we mentioned last week, if you're already subscribed, it should just be a non-issue for everyone. So just know that it's basically the same show. We've rebranded mostly to why have we rebranded, Rochelle? Just for kind of continuity and um,
Yeah, continuity. Hold on, let me rewind really quick.
yeah,
Instagram has not been changed yet because they have this crazy rule that you have to wait 14 days.
that's
Whatever.
right. That's
And
a
then the
funny story though, because we set the name aside well in advance, and then when we tried to delete it, they're like, it's still unavailable.
it's still unavailable. So don't do that if you rebrand. um,
Yeah.
with that said, and then our Twitter is changed. However, we haven't been like pushing that, but now we are.
Yeah, we'll start using the Twitter.
No sub to our Twitter. Views and Paradox.
Views and Paradox. This way we can just kind of be Views and Paradox all over the place.
Yeah. So the point of it, one, was to kind of keep it along John's brand also. And I think it's more catchy, personally. And I think it gives a more unique twist on it because our style tends to be like the antithesis of what the world really believes, like the general public believes in this movie. And we tend to be really
Yeah, we don't care what other people think.
yeah, we don't care. Minus Spider-Man, like the world loves that movie.
Yeah.
But
For good
yeah,
reason.
that was the point of doing that. The Facebook group will probably stay the same name. We'll add Views and Paradox just so like it's not confusing. But this is still a club. We still want your guys' opinions and nominations here and there when we can't really decide on a film.
Yeah.
There's just so many good ones and bad ones to choose from. So yeah, same idea, different name.
Yeah, we'll go to you guys for input occasionally, and I like being able to participate in movie conversations online, especially with the quarantine ongoing. It's nice to just like have a place where I can kind of geek out. So definitely keep using that, and that's one of the reasons also we're just keeping the name there, Movie Club, is so that it's just kind of obvious what it is. Whereas Views and Paradox allows us to be a little bit more flexible with the show also.
Yeah.
At this point, we don't have any firm plans to do non-movies, but this title does allow us to like talk about things that aren't movies if we want to at a later date.
My dog, my dog just escaped the room because the cat opened the door. Hold on,
Oh
sorry.
no! All right, we have an emergency. I can vamp for a minute as we go. All right. Goodness gracious, I don't want to introduce the show without Rochelle, but I know we have
Easy fix. Easy fix.
easy fix. All right, I was doing a terrible job of vamping while you were gone, just so you know.
These animals, you guys, they're going insane just like us.
I know they're probably just like, what on earth has changed? Like,
Yeah.
why is my routine being messed with
My
so
dogs in
hard?
the neighborhood have been barking more and like at each other. You know, they can't see each other, but I'm like, they're talking and they're trying to figure out what is going on. I really believe this.
Is your human home? Because mine's home all the time.
He
Yeah.
won't leave.
Yeah. I used to hate it, but now this is worse.
There'll never be a separation anxiety ridden dog again.
I don't know. We'll see where there as it lingers on. But on to the topic. So for our first episode, quote unquote, of Views and Paradox, we're gonna do Snowpiercer. So this is directed by Bong Joon Ho, who more recently did the incredibly well reviewed Parasite. Um, and
Incredibly well reviewed and incredibly cleaned up at the Academy Awards.
yeah, I mean, Parasite was good. I gotta say,
Yeah,
um,
it was amazing.
this movie, not quite on that level. Similar themes.
It was a good stepping stone for him to get to that level.
Yeah, and this was like his first foray into what he would consider international filmmaking. His first like sort of Hollywood project. The Host was a movie that he did earlier in his career that did kind of cross over to American audiences. It was kind of this like cult hit. More on that later. And I think that kind of allowed him to segue into doing these more like Hollywood films and like to be this kind of crossover voice. What's so crazy about Parasite is that it's not a Hollywood film and it's still cleaned up the way it did.
Oh yeah. But real quick, Hollywood needed that, so
Yeah, and like Hollywood needs Bong Joon-ho. He's so
yeah, they do.
adorable, right?
He's the most endearing man in the world. We need to talk about that for a second. First of all, the way he beamed at these awards, the Golden Globes and these, I was like, this man has the most golden heart in the world. But then when he was in the booth where they take your picture after, he made them kiss.
What? Oh, the statues?
The statues,
like,
and I was like, I love this man.
I love the like proud dad meme that was going around where at every award show he's like taking pictures of the crew and stuff and he just looks super excited.
Yeah.
He's so cute.
I love that man. If you ever want to cast me in a film, Bong Joon-ho, I'm here.
Yeah. Already love you.
Already love you.
All right, so let's just do a quick rundown of the movie. So this is a sci-fi high concept movie based on a graphic novel. What was the name of that graphic novel?
Please, I'm going to butcher this.
It's French, right?
Transpersonnage.
Les Transpersonnage? I don't know.
It's actually a comic from late 2004.
Okay. And so he picked it up and adapted it.
And he picked it up while doing pre-production for The Host.
Okay, cool. So basically, in the not too distant future, global warming has hit critical mass, and as a sort of last-ditch effort, humanity sprays a chemical gas. I forget what it's called. It's like C7.
Why CW7?
Yeah, something like that. It's something really simple, actually. They spray this gas into the air, and there's one person who's smart enough to say that it's going to not work and go too far. At least one person that we know of. And he builds this train that does a year-long circuit and is going to hold the remnants of humanity, presumably until the Earth thaws enough for people to kind of get off the train and repopulate. They never say that expressly, but that has to be the...
why else?
Yeah, why else?
Yeah.
So that's like the starting premise. And we've been on this train for 17 years now. And this film is about an attempted rebellion. It is led by Curtis, played by Chris Evans, along with his like one-limbed mentor, Gilliam, played by the venerable John Hurt. I think he only has the one arm because he's got like two peg legs and a hook for an arm, right? Yeah, he's pretty messed up. So the two of them are kind of orchestrating a rebellion, and their plan is to get to the front of the train where the engine is, because if you control the engine, you control the train. And that's the basic premise. So we're going to kind of go through some of the major points along the way. It's such a straightforward premise. Like literally the movie moves in a straight line, both figuratively and literally. And, and it doesn't deviate from that ever. Like that's the whole movie. They go from the back of the train to the front of the train. So we are going to talk about it with full spoilers, as always. If you haven't seen the movie, check it out. Or if you don't care, go ahead and watch and hear our thoughts. But we are going to get into plot details throughout. And So that's your warning. So, what were kind of like your? I just before we really kind of go into our sort of pre-decided topics, what is your kind of overall feel on this movie? I just kind of see where you're at.
Well, I loved it. I'm definitely a fangirl of Bong Joon-ho. I'm sorry I keep butchering your name, sir.
Forgiveness.
I'm not as cultured as I thought I was. I did love it. I was concerned about the plot holes throughout. You know, my logical end just can't let that stuff go.
Sure.
However, the set design was beautiful, which really caught me, and it was one of the few movies that I actually enjoyed the fight scenes.
Okay.
Yeah. So all that stood out to me.
Yeah, I feel like you actually do like fight scenes, but that just sometimes you don't, and those impressions are stronger than the ones that you like.
Yeah.
That's my theory. We'll see how it pans out because
we'll see.
As we get through more movies with fight scenes eventually. Yeah, I felt similarly where like visually this movie is pretty stunning. And it's directed very well, but it does ask you to suspend your disbelief a lot.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like as we go through this, just kind of as a like like a footnote or something, it might sound like I don't like the movie occasionally because I'm probably gonna pick a lot of the logical leaps and plot hole type things, but overall I did enjoy the movie, and I think that it does do a good job of like having very clear themes and asking some interesting questions and like just kind of doing some interesting things with the narrative, but it does like constantly ask you to just go along with it, and I was good with that for like a good half of the movie, and then it just like I got one too many and I just started like picking it apart to death.
I found myself doing that too. However, I had to also remind myself that this is his social commentary, and I was obviously comparing this to Parasite, which is logical and subtle.
Yeah, and Parasite has like very few major holes in it. Yeah, like it's pretty tight. Like even as ridiculous as some of the stuff in Parasite is, it's way easier to kind of suspend your disbelief in that movie. Like they're set up better, things are explained better, and it asks much less of you in terms of suspension. Like I can always take like 3 to 4 big asks in a movie. You take Star Wars, it's like, okay, you're asking me to believe in the Force, I'll give it to you. You're asking me to like kind of play along with a number of different things, and I'm fine. But like at a certain point, if you just keep asking me things, I do have a hard time suspending my disbelief. All right. With that said, let's get into it. So the movie begins with kind of some setup and whatnot, and we meet sort of our cast of characters. We meet Octavia Spencer, who has a young son who is used to raise the stakes, or fairly early on. We meet Tilda Swinton as she's kind of like, I don't know, what would her role be? She's like a spokesperson for the front, right? Or representative.
Maybe like a general.
Yeah, she's like some kind of representative of authority on the train, charged with keeping the back of the train in line. And if it wasn't clear, the front of the train is living the high life, and the back of the train are, they're on like Holocaust trains. It's like really brutal. They're just like living cramped, and they literally get like walked in circles for exercise, and they are fed gelatin blocks. And
more on that later.
What's that?
More on that later.
Yeah, more on that later. Definitely more on that later. And they're like counted every day. And we learned that there have been 2, at least I think it was 2 if I remember correctly, 2 failed rebellions, right?
Right, 2. Rule of 3s.
Rule of 3. So this is our 3rd right? Third time's the charm, or so we hope. And we don't know a lot about our protagonist. He has like a lackey, played by Jamie Bell, who follows him around like a lapdog and is just like, you should be the leader. And like, he's like just very pro Chris Evans, and Chris Evans is very much uh, like he's acting like the leader, but he's also playing the reluctant leader card, even though he is being very take chargey. So there's that whole kind of dynamic going. Um, I
Part
don't
of
know.
that is because, oh, what is his name?
Which one?
The older gentleman with the no arms.
Oh, John Hurt or Gilliam in the movie.
Gilliam. Yeah, Gilliam. Um, Continually pushes him to be the leader and tells him that this is his destiny. Not in so many words, but
That's true. Yeah, he is like our Obi-Wan, to go back to Star Wars.
yes.
He's definitely like Chris Evans's mentor, and they have this kind of mentor-student relationship. Like, it's pretty clear that they're not, like, I didn't even get like father vibes. I literally just got like, you know,
Mentor. Yeah.
Sifu. Just kind of like he is the wise one, and probably had something to do with the failed rebellions of the past. Like, you get that feeling.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe that's how he lost his leg.
right. There is a weird element that they plant here, which I feel like is never well explained, which is the capsules, right?
Yes.
So Evans is getting clues from somewhere ahead of the car, and Gilliam is helping him decipher them, essentially.
And the capsules are placed in the gelatin block.
Right. And it kind of made me start going like, how did they find them in the first place? And like,
How do they know which one to pick up?
how are they locating them? How is like everybody in the back cars not in on this? Like, Chris Evans is playing it close to the vest, like he's got a special contact up front. But we learn later, and I'm just going to jump a little bit ahead just for this, that they're just being sent to him out of the blue. Like, he didn't have a prior contact. He references that they need to get to the prison section of the train because there's somebody who can help them get to the front. And they seem to know this, we assume, by these capsules, right? I mean, that's what I got out of it. I don't know. Was that kind of the same for you?
Yeah, they just leave little clues as to what will help the next rebellion.
Yeah, and they're really obtuse also.
Yeah, it's literally one word.
Yeah,
water.
Right? And you're
Electrical.
like, electrical.
Yeah.
I guess with the theory being that, like, if one of them gets discovered, then nobody has the whole puzzle. But it is kind of a very convenient mechanism that I actually don't think they really needed, because it doesn't get like well explained or justified.
Gilliam could have explained all of them.
Yeah, and like really quickly too,
Like, we
right?
learn that later, So, like, why the drama?
Yeah, I guess it was like on a plot level. I feel like maybe it was just so that we could have the scene where we chase the kid around, right?
Okay.
So early on, they need one of these clues, and it's in the gelatin bars that they're eating, and Octavia Spencer's son Timmy has it, and they establish that he's 5 years old, and that he's very nimble, and he like runs away from them, and they like chase him around, and he's like getting under the bunk beds, and like he's crawling into tight spaces. So I think part of it is just to establish that, right? Just to like plant that seed in our head that he is small and fits into small places. So we eventually like coax the thing out of him and get our clue, and people around Chris Evans keep being like, is it time yet? When's it gonna happen? And he's like, not yet, soon. Very like too cool for school. And before they get to the point, the front of the car comes, and they're like, oh, we're taking the kids for in health inspection. right?
First they take a man.
Oh yeah, you wanted to cover this,
How
right?
they
Yeah,
set
go ahead.
like kind of how they set the tone to be like we just take whoever the fuck we want.
Yeah,
So first they come and ask who's the violinist. A couple of volunteers. They only take the man.
right. And they
They
crush his his
they
husband's
measure
wife
him.
or his hand. Yeah, right.
Yeah, they measure his hand and like inspect his hand, and then they take him off, and then like a miniature. I don't want to say rebellion. They deny it. They turn to go back to the line to get their gelatin bars, and the guards basically, not prison guards, the guards force the man basically to go.
Right.
And
They just
from
pull him away.
there they bring in the same people, and this is where we meet um, the basically next in command Tilda, and as well as the assistant to the conductor, and they come and they need kids and they measure them, to
Yeah.
keep that theme.
Is this the same assistant we see later?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I did totally miss that actually.
Yeah.
Makes sense
And
though.
that starts like a big miniature rebellion and kicks off the film when they take Octavia Spencer's son Timmy and another child.
Yeah. And the speech that Tilda Swinton gives is pretty overt, where she's like, "You're the shoe, right? And you wouldn't wear a shoe on your head." And we don't even know what the guy's crime is that is being demonstrated, but he did something to step out of line.
Yeah.
That was something I thought was weird that we didn't know what his crime was, unless I just missed it. The arm guy.
I don't remember.
Yeah, right.
Was
Did you
that-
wanna tell him what happens to that guy?
Oh God.
'Cause we
Okay,
didn't
so
cover it.
now I remember. It was his son that was taken. So it was Timmy and that man's son.
Okay.
And so they used him as a
An example.
play. They made him an example. And they stick his arm out of the window of the train to freeze it. So it's cut off about here.
Yeah.
And his arm is just sticking out. And the train is still going, and it freezes his arm. And
Yeah.
obviously, very painful. I think the actor did an amazing job
Yeah.
portraying that pain. Because I mean,
It hurts him for like a minute, and then he's just kind of like desensitized. Like it's so cold, he's just lost all feeling in the arm.
Yeah, yeah. And then they smash it.
And then they smash it,
Mallet.
which compared to something like Parasite, filmed with a lot of restraint. Because I didn't flinch during this scene, but it wants you to flinch because it's like Hammer, and then it immediately cuts away before they actually show the breakage, which is very different from Parasite, where there's like people getting very brutally hit and they never pull away the camera. Mild spoilers for Parasite. There's violence.
What struck me about that was the hole and the apparatus that they used were like there already. It was built into the train.
Yeah.
So this is something that the conductor and engineer thought about.
Yeah. Why they needed to have this like third class citizen car?
They didn't do anything but breed.
Yeah. It just feels like, yeah, I guess it's just they're only there to be exploited if they need to exploit, right? That's basically it. They're like, we might need people to exploit for unsavory things, and we're going to want to force them to do stuff, and we're going to want to like take their kids and do awful things like that. So right. So they're literally there just to be oppressed. And they do establish that they were poor coming onto the train.
Yeah.
So
I guess they're just maintaining the status quo as far as class.
yeah.
But yeah,
if you could design this whole train, I just kept feeling like you could design it to be humane also. It just seems like, why design it to be an asshole?
To go off that really quick, poverty is a disease at the end of the day. Let's be real. And
The plague.
it's interesting to me that they would keep that in a situation where they need to repopulate eventually.
Yeah, especially like knowing how discontent people act.
Yeah.
I was wondering. Yeah, okay, I don't want to get ahead. So then we get to the rebellion, and they're like, finally, we're gonna go. They get some kind of word, and basically, we just needed to establish everything before we get here. It doesn't take us too long to get to it.
Nope. Removing the kids is what really triggers it.
Right, and there's a moment when they take the kids where Chris Evans gets the like final clue that he personally needs, where Tilda Swinton goes, get those useless guns down.
Yeah.
She calls the guns useless, and he's like, I'm betting that there are no bullets in the guns because they all got used up in the last two rebellions. Like, we can't make gunpowder. We're not digging up saltpeter. You know, it makes sense that, like, there would be sort of this resource strain and that things would go extinct. So I liked that concept that, like, things are going extinct. And so he's like, I think bullets are extinct. And he bets his life on it by running out. Like, they get a battering ram, first of all. Where did that battering ram come from?
Where did they store it?
Where did they store it? It is a full tree.
Yeah, it's a full tree truck.
It's a full tree. It's giant.
It's huge.
It's so big. And, like, where the hell did that come from? I was expecting, like, a bum rush. I was not expecting the battering ram.
I know.
Yeah, so that's, like, I feel like that's the first really big, like, what the fuck is that doing here? And it wasn't even, like...
Not for me. My first big one, just to go really quick, was like, how did all these international people get on this one train? Anyways.
You know, Korean director, he's making a Hollywood film. He's like, it's not just going to be white people.
Yeah, no, of course. Of course.
Though as we get further into the train, it is mostly white people. I do think that is a conscious decision.
Yeah, strategic choice.
Yeah, and like Tilda Swinton, you know, and like all of her cronies, they're all white.
Right. So to get back to the battering ram, so they have that, and then they get them back in line, right?
Yeah.
Like in roll call, basically, and Chris Evans stands up and runs directly to one of the guards with the gun and puts the gun right here, and the guard shoots and nothing comes out, and then everybody.
And then it's mayhem.
Yeah.
And I like it because like there's a fun thing that Bong does with this scene where, like, as soon as that trigger gets pulled, the style of the cinematography shifts dramatically, and it just becomes like this very like shaky and blurry and like disoriented, very disoriented. Like, I felt like I was like, oh, it's like watching something drunk almost. You know, it just like becomes so kind of out there. It's
like the makings of PTSD. As
right. Right. It's like PTS in action, right? Yeah. So it's as though you're experiencing a flashback in real time, which I thought was a nice technique because it's just like as soon as they pull that trigger, it's, you know, everything is on the line. You know, it's that point of no return. Right. And the idea of the point of no return is something very universal. I think that like we've all had moments in our life where it's like, you know, as soon as you do this, you can't take it back.
Are we experiencing that now?
Right? Yeah, maybe. So yeah, and they do this kind of crazy thing where they've got like 40 seconds to get through a number of doors, right? There's like security doors, and they're like, we can get through as many as we can. And they
commandeer the log.
Yeah, so the log they like put it onto a cart and then they wheel it the rest of the way. And like, I was like, it's pretty good planning as far as that goes. I mean, you know, regardless, where do we get the log? And it is a log. It's not even a beam. All right, so I'll get off the log. So we kind of have our first victory, right? So we get through and we have our first kind of big victory. And one of the first things, like major things that we come across, is the protein bars. Right, so we have a guy making the protein bars, and he's so just like they all recognize him. He's somebody who's been pulled from the back of the train at some point in time, and he's just so absorbed in his work that he doesn't even like register the other people. This is like that, like, you know, this is like Sinclair's Jungle, where he's just like so factory, you know, programmed that he can't even like
Stop what he's doing.
Yeah. Chris Evans looks in the machine and he gets very disturbed by what he sees. And what he sees is like a bunch of crickets, basically, or locusts, some kind of bugs. He just sees bugs, and the bugs get ground up.
I had to like pause and like really squint because I was like, are there human remains in there? Like, why are you so disgusted? And it was crickets.
After his reaction, he's like, oh, God. Like, after his reaction, I rewound it. And I was like, did I miss something?
Yeah.
Are there fingers in there that I didn't see or something? It's just bugs.
Yeah, it's just crickets. And I was like, first of all, people, like cultures all over the world eat insects. So shut up.
Crickets are super high in protein.
Yeah, and I've eaten crickets. I've eaten a cricket protein bar and like something else, and I've eaten a chocolate covered scorpion. All of them were delicious. Yeah. So
and like as far as animal proteins, pretty humane. You know.
Yeah, humane.
I mean they're worried about, you know, they all miss steak, but
yeah, some of them don't even know what steak is because they were born on the train. But like you were saying, it's very healthy. It's healthier than red meat.
Yeah. So I had a fun little anecdote. And I got this from a British television show called Supersizers Go, where they did like British food throughout history. And they got to World War II, and everybody in Britain had to go on rations. And it was just like really bland canned food that like people kind of hated historically. But it was packed with nutrients, and it was just like everything they needed to survive, and like minus all of like the, you know, like the trans fats and like kind of all this bad crap, and like it made the Britons healthier than they'd probably ever been, like as a result. So I was like, this would probably be a similar effect in this movie, where like these protein bars are probably making the people in the back of the train way healthier than the people in the front.
Right. Let me touch on those two things really quick. So one, the actual like construction of the protein bars was made with seaweed, tangle, sugar, and gelatin. Jamie Bell, who plays Edgar, hated it, and Tilda Swinton loved it. So this is like real. It's what it was made out of.
Tilda Swinton's so weird.
Yeah, I know, it is weird. And then to touch on the fact that the people in the back would be better fit and stronger, Bong Joon-ho didn't want to originally cast Chris Evans in the lead because he has a muscular physique, and he felt like the people in the back would be poverty-stricken, you know, in the tail section. So they were really careful with their camera angles and everything. But I think part of the reason that Bong Joon-ho ended up casting him, other than him being Chris Evans, is that Chris Evans personally contacted him to be cast in the film.
He likes indie projects. Like outside of the Marvel films, he goes out of his way to like be in these smaller films.
Right. So I think that just really made him go, okay, like I can look past the muscular physique. However, your point makes so much sense, and like I think that should have been taken into account. But most of the people in the back weren't sickly looking. What do you think? Right.
I didn't think that they looked particularly unhealthy. Like they were dirty, but not like nobody's really emaciated. You know, I felt like they looked pretty normal health wise. Aside from, you know, the cast of characters who are missing limbs from, you know, having them shoved out of the train in the cold, which is actually a really good misdirect for later. I have to say. But yeah, we have like a whole cast of people who are like missing limbs. So like they're in really bad shape, but everybody else is pretty healthy. And I think that like when I saw what was in the bars, it actually made sense. I was like, this actually logically holds up.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally. And so we learn that the little clues that Chris Evans has been getting were placed in the bars by the former train mate of these
Right.
people.
But he
So
didn't
he,
know where they were coming from either.
yeah, he didn't know. Just knew this is my job. I put it in here, and that's
Yeah. I've been given these and I put them in one and that's it. And so that's
that's
when we
funny.
actually learned that Chris Evans, doesn't know who's giving him the clues. And I thought that was like, I was like, what? That was really strange.
Be like they come from the second in command, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, like I thought they would know they had a contact somehow, somebody who felt bad for them or something, but they just like straight up don't know.
yeah,
The next major plot point is that um, we meet our friend in the prison. So this is Kang Ho Song, who was the lead in Parasite, uh, famous South Korean actor. I actually know him from a number of films, which I haven't seen that many South Korean films, but I realized that most of them he is in. So, like, I first saw him in this movie called The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, which is like a slightly comedic homage to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And then I saw him in a vampire movie called Thirst, which is really bonkers and very South Korean in its mentality, and just in its style. And then, uh, yeah, like this and Parasite. So actually, more familiar with his work than I had kind of realized. And he's very good and very different in everything that he's in.
yeah.
I like, since we're getting to him now, I just wanted to like put that out there that like
His
he's like
ability to perform is amazing.
he's like Daniel Day Lewis good. I All those roles I mentioned are he's so different in them. Uh like yeah, he's just like, and he's got a kind of a subtlety to him, but like in The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, he's the weird character. And he's very strange, and it's like really off the wall. Uh and in Thirst, he's like this very like timid student who becomes a vampire, and like just it goes like really kind of off the wall in its arc. So yeah, he's someone that I think is, he's deserving of kind of all the praise he's gotten from Parasite for just like having years and years of very good work. So we meet him and his daughter. I like that they got around him having to speak English by just giving him like a translator. Like that was kind of neat. I did at this point kind of wish I had the subtitles on.
Or we need to the physical like electronic translators that we see actually today. Um, Not a human translator.
Yeah, good point. It's like the size of like, yeah, it's like the size of this, and he's got like a little box, and he just like talks into it, and it translates for him, and vice versa. So they just have a Korean to English translator device that they use, and they just use that. And I like how, sometimes they show it and sometimes they don't bother.
Yeah,
I was fine with that.
you too.
Uh, yeah,
I thought to myself, this is gonna get old fast.
yeah.
Yeah. And then they took it away, and I was like, good job.
Well, yeah, I like, sometimes I have subtitles on, sometimes I don't. For this movie, I didn't, and when this happened, I suddenly wished I had the subtitles because I definitely missed some of his earlier lines that come out of the little voice box.
Okay.
Um, just because they come off low and like he's talking over them, and it would be hard to kind of hear someone in a practical sense when it's translating them in real time.
Yeah. Completely.
And then they are like, what's that?
I'm going to say we learned he's an electrician.
Yeah, and then he helped design the train. He's like an
He helped design the
engineer
train.
who helped design the train. We don't know why he's in prison.
I was thinking because he's a drug addict. So
Right.
we learned that he's a drug addict, and we learned that the drug on the only drug available is something called chronal, and
Chrono.
it is made from the nuclear waste.
Yeah, it's like a waste byproduct from the train's engine.
Toxic waste. It wasn't nuclear. I'm reaching for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's toxic.
It's toxic, and they use it to get high.
Yeah, and it's like
And
apparently
flammable.
it's popular on the train to get high, and they just like I don't know.
But it's valuable.
Right.
It's one of the things that they use as currency, that and the protein bars. And so because it's valuable and because it's a drug, you don't see it at the tail end of the train. You start to see it once we reach the higher echelons of
Yeah, when we get to the
population.
rave, I guess
Yeah.
everybody's high on that. Yeah, they got to be high on something. They're at a rave. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
What's a rave if you're sober, man?
So yes, so we're
Yeah,
introduced to him
and his daughter.
and his daughter and the drug use issue.
Yeah, and they're like basically, if you help us get through the doors, because like they managed to get through the first few doors by force, and they're like, if you can help us get through the rest of the doors, we'll keep giving you drugs like as we progress farther. Like, and Chris Evans has stockpiled a bunch of it apparently for this exact thing. Like,
Right. Also, we learned that this man is like hoarded cigarettes, like real
he busts out a little pack of cigarettes, and
Marlboro Light.
it's the last two cigarettes. They're like, I thought cigarettes were extinct. And he
Yeah.
smokes
And
the second to last one, like right there.
I
in front
laughed
of
at
him.
all the people like that were Jones in the crowd. I was like, I understand. We're both ex-smokers, so I was like, I'm right there with you, girl, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, we learned that, and obviously he needs fire to light the cigarette. We'll leave that there for now.
Yeah. So, yeah, he smokes the second to last one, and he saves that last one for later in the plot. um, all right. I guess we'll. The next thing I have written down here is the classroom.
The classroom.
Does this come before? Actually, I feel like this comes after the second. I can't remember the order now. This is how I have it written. Is classroom. Um, no,
I think
it
no,
comes after. It comes after because, um, yeah, the classroom is kind of late. Actually, I feel.
yeah, it's kind of it's like one of the front cars.
Yeah.
So at this point, they're going through like the agriculture train, the what other ones? The club?
No, not yet. They go through like some living cars though, and
Yes,
we just
living
like
cars.
we
The
start
thing
seeing more high life.
high class people. Like we see people sitting in the agriculture train, like an old, like affluent woman knitting. You kind of see that throughout. Like every car has like an older person doing whatever hobby it is that they are stereotyped to do.
Right.
I found that an interesting peppering.
They were like, I think that there's a lot of older people because they were already wealthy when they got on the train, right? And so like
Right.
something like that.
And we learn that all the workers obviously come from the tail end of the train, as far as like the farmers, the people who like pick the produce, and tend to the chickens and stuff. But they don't really react to like this.
Yeah, every time they come in, everybody's just like, "Who are these people?" I don't.
Yeah, like what? Well, I'm gonna pick my tomatoes.
I'm just gonna keep going. Yeah, they do. They do the plants, and then we get to a big second fight, and it's like right when they have they encounter a bunch of guards, and this time they have axes, right? For the second fight, they all have axes. They've discarded the fake guns because okay, we know we don't have bullets now, so we're gonna have a melee battle, and this
was my favorite fight scene.
This was your favorite fight scene? Why is that?
Ever, probably in life.
Really?
I love this. Yeah.
That's funny.
It was cool. It was really cool. So the reason it was so cool was because so they opened the door. Okay, wait, hold on. We missed a big part. So
Did we?
the daughter of Namgung, or no, Song, right? That's his name, Song.
Yeah, Kang Ho Song. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
The actor's name is way easier than the character name.
His daughter, she can like feel or see. We're not
Oh,
really
right.
sure.
She's got like clairvoyance, they call it.
Yeah, clairvoyance. She says, "Don't open that door," and then it was too late. The electrician had the door basically on the way to opening when she said that.
Right, and then there's troops waiting.
Yeah, that's where we see the axe wielding, knife wielding, sword wielding guards.
Right.
And there's a good like minute. There's a good tension moment. They gut a fish, which is obviously
that was like really weird.
I know. I was like, what's the point?
Something very primal. They get blood on their weapons. I think was like the point. It's like that my axe is. It felt very just like primal, right?
Right.
That like this rebellion has reduced them back to their animal natures. That they just like are going caveman on each other.
Right, and then so the fight goes on. It seems as if the tail end of the train is winning. And something happens to pause the fight. Do you remember what it was?
I do remember what it was, yes.
It was really creepy. They got really... Yeah, go, because I don't remember.
It's New Year's.
New Year, they crossed the bridge.
Right before we get to that, I just wanted to mention that in the fight, so like Chris Evans gets an axe, and we get a number of like slow motion shots that I found them to be very reminiscent of like the Old Boy fights. Do you know Old Boy? It's famous for this like one take hallway scene where it's shot like it's shot like there's just a breakaway wall and it follows a guy and you just see the side view and he just like takes on all these people with a hammer. And there's some shots of Chris Evans like wielding his axe that I found a little bit reminiscent of that just because of the way they do the cutaway on the train, like where they just have to take a wall in this kind of small hallway space. And that's another famous South Korean film. So I saw it as maybe like at least a little bit of a nod to that film, which has been very influential worldwide. So they get broken by New Year's.
Which is their New Year. Anytime they cross the bridge, it's New Year.
Yeah, so that we learned that the train has a 1-year circuit. They actually spell that out for us later, but in the classroom that we jumped ahead to.
It was interesting to see like the fight, like this gruesome battle stopped and everyone like took a moment to like celebrate.
They do the countdown for the New Year's.
Countdown. I was like, what?
But what was weird to me, and we briefly touched on this before the show. What was weird to me is just that like, why is New Year's on a bridge?
Yeah.
Like, why would it not be at a station that it left from? You'd think it would be the moment that they left the station that they would count that as like when we do the year cycles.
And this bridge is clearly not a station. Just to be very clear about that. Like it's very clear it's not the station. So you're like, why is it that? So we pass the bridge. They have their moment.
Also, right before this is the first time we get windows is like is shortly before this fight, and I didn't realize it at first. It took me a minute to be like, oh wait, there were no windows anywhere. There's just like that one porthole. That's the only thing that's like a window. Yeah, the arm porthole, which is then closed up. But like they literally don't get windows in the back. Like they don't get to look outside the train. Because this is like the first time they kind of get to see outside. We had a very silly scene where we busted through a bunch of ice. We can skip over that. And so then, New Year's happens, and suddenly they all start getting like goggles that they're putting on, right?
Rewind.
Because it happens after the bridge, right?
No, it happens after they bust through the snow. So they bust through the snow, and
they look for the bodies at the bridge, right?
Yeah. Okay, so they look for the 7 who tried to escape at the bridge. Yeah. Obviously, that didn't go well.
We learned that 7 people got off the train, and they froze outside within minutes.
Yeah.
On one of the previous rebellions, so we don't know which one.
Yeah, we don't know which one. And then after that, they're still fighting.
Yeah, and Song is the one who looks at them. He makes a point to be like,
Yeah.
There they are, and there's a plane crash down there.
Yeah, and he explains it to the daughter. Everybody's still fighting. And then all of a sudden we find out that we are hitting a long tunnel. And it's going to go dark.
Yeah.
And as we're doing that, as we're finding out, the guards now begin to put on night vision goggles. So now they have the upper hand. So the fight continues, and obviously now the tail end is getting their ass whooped.
Right.
And
it should have been a lot worse. I just want to say that like Chris Evans should have died right there. All of the important characters probably should have died right then and there. Because night vision is like, when you think of like the American military, our biggest advantage in most situations is night vision and like our ability to see in the dark. And like when we're fighting insurgencies and stuff overseas, like that's the tool that is like our crazy weapon. That and drones, but like night vision is not to be underestimated. It is so powerful when you can see and somebody else can't. Like they would just wreck them.
How long would you say this goes on for? 5 minutes, 10 minutes? It's a
Too
fucking
long. Too long.
Huh?
Too long. Yeah.
But as this is happening, Chris Evans remembers there were cigarettes, and we have a match.
We have fire.
So a torch gets lighted, then many torches get
Then
lighted.
suddenly there's torches everywhere.
They explain that, but we won't go into that.
I feel like this is something that like could have been set up as like John Hurt rather plotting and being like, now's the moment, and like that we've been prepping for. Because I think it would have been a good turn that way, but it felt like something that they just were doing like in the moment. Like it felt spontaneous, and I thought that was weird.
I think it was, because like all of a sudden they have fire. They didn't know that they could make that, at least not in the tail anymore. And like that's a pretty standard protest, if you will, is using fire. And like a lot of the people live during proper Earth times, and so they know, like, get your little fucking torch and like keep lighting until everybody has a collection.
Yeah, they do they even do like a marathon pass off run. The relay. They do the relay race with the torch, which is
it was pretty cool. And so now the tail end has light. They're using the fire and light and an additional weapon, the fire. So now they begin to get the upper hand. One thing I found really interesting that I found online about this scene was there was no additional lighting used while filming the torch part.
It's just the fire?
Just the fire.
I mean, because it is very just like pinpoint kind of light. That makes sense to me.
So now the classroom, we get into the classroom.
So then we get to the classroom after. So we have like, our first semi-defeat, but then we beat them back with the fire. We continue to move up. I think this is around the point where we capture Tilda Swinton first. So it's during this fight. Chris Evans has a choice to like save his friend, his like lapdog friend who's been following him around, or capture Tilda Swinton, and he chooses to capture Tilda Swinton. He sees her as a valuable hostage, right? So this is the point where they capture Tilda Swinton, and like at the cost of a person we're supposed to like. So sacrifices are being made, and I think that this is important in terms of his character development, that like he's willing to make sacrifices.
But he realizes it, and you could see the guilt, and we later learned that the guilt is deeper rooted than just like I made a sacrifice and I fucked my friend.
Right.
Which we'll talk about.
Yeah, which we'll get to soon, I think. Because most of the stuff that comes up, I don't think we need to hit too point by point. But we do get to the classroom, which is kind of weird that they're still holding class, I think, when this rebellion is going on. You'd think that the children would just be hidden away. Because, like, once again, they enter the classroom and everybody's just like, oh, look, visitors from the back of the train.
Yeah, like it happens every day. But to me, it made sense that was happening because they didn't have any contingency plan for this. So they just assumed every room was going to stop them, especially the axe-wielding night vision people,
Yeah, I guess so. And then during the classroom scene, we get a surprise twist in, you know, as you progress forward, it can't be too easy, right? And suddenly, like a guy comes by with a bunch of eggs. They're passing out eggs to everyone
For the new year.
for the new year. Yeah, New Year's eggs from our precious supply. And then we learn that hidden in the eggs are a secret supply of guns with bullets. We have totally a school shooting scene in this movie, by the way.
Finally.
Right? Which the teacher herself busts out the guns on
Pregnant
our...
teacher, P.S.
What's that?
A pregnant teacher.
A pregnant teacher.
Pregnant teacher.
Right? Very responsible. And that actress, hold on, I'm gonna pull up real quick. Where did I put that note?
While you pull it up, I just want to say, in case people are unaware, that eggs are commonly used in cultures that celebrate spring in the New Year in the spring.
Oh,
as a symbol of New Year.
Yeah,
so
fertility.
He didn't pull that out of his butt. That's like a thing.
Nice. Yeah, Allison Pill does the teacher, and I knew her going into this viewing from Star Trek Picard. She's like one of the main cast members there, and so I was like, oh hey, I know you. So just that was kind of fun. She does look like an elementary school teacher. Like there's just something about her.
Great typecast for her. Didn't expect her to be this like badass, which was like a nice juxtaposition. Obviously, that's my favorite word. To what I was expecting.
Yeah,
I like that.
In
addition to the gun wielding eggs,
it was fun. So around this time, they also introduce a new villain, and this was the thing that I mentioned at the beginning, where it was just like one too many things that it was asking me to do. This was the point that broke me, where I was just like, who the hell is this guy? Because way behind them on the train, suddenly there's like some super soldier maniac character and also more elite troops. Like, I get that they got the guns from the eggs, but like, where the hell did this guy come from? He just materialized out of nowhere in like a perfect suit.
Like, what is his point?
We never get any form of backstory or current story about this character. He seems like demonically evil. He's like psychotic to the point where he like shoots his own men for no good reason when they don't move fast enough. Like he just kind of broke me, where I was just like, this, I get that they wanted to like suddenly have a threat from behind them as well to like raise the stakes for the end of the film when they inevitably get to the front of the train, but it just like broke my suspension, my ability to suspend disbelief. At no point do they show people like climb on top of the train to get around them, or that there's secret tunnel. Like there's just no attempt to explain him, and that was one thing that like really I just thought was kind of crazy. Yeah. But anyway, we make our way. Let's just hit to the front of the train. So we get to the front, the engine, and we meet Ed Harris at the front of the train. I thought this was nice casting. It's a very similar role to roles he's kind of done in the past. You know, like... Yeah, and it evoked like Truman Show and like Apollo 13 and just like, you know, and he's got such a great voice for like Stern Leader. And he gives us the rest of our sort of twists, right? He tells us that he's been talking for years with John Hurt's character.
They were co-engineers on this train.
Yeah, so apparently they made it together.
Yeah.
And like...
The class system.
Yeah, so, and John Hurt was like so on board with this that he was like, sure, I'll go to the back of the train and keep people in line back there. And like talks to him regularly, according to Ed Harris. I feel like John Hurt died at some point, but I don't recall specifically.
Yeah, he gets killed in the torch.
That's right. He like dies during that night battle.
Well, no, he gets captured.
Something happens to him.
They execute him basically on camera.
Yeah, they kill him. So he's dead and can't defend himself. Like, we don't really know. Like, Ed Harris is clearly untrustworthy. So you never know really if you should believe him. But if we take him at his word, the two of them plotted this whole thing together, and he's the one who's been sending these pills back, and and essentially orchestrating this rebellion. Like, he kind of says that, like, the train has gotten too full, and your rebellion has helped us reduce the numbers on the train. And on top of that, I want to make you the leader, right?
It was the plan all
It was the
along.
plan all along. And this is where, like, the idea of his willingness to make sacrifices kind of plays into Ed Harris's plan. Because if he's willing to make all those sacrifices, then, maybe he would continue to be able to do so. Um,
We completely skipped over Chris Evans' monologue. So
well,
this
is
monologue,
that before he goes onto the train?
just before he gets into the engine, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like
I just mixed up the order. Yeah,
so it's
so
a really great monologue, but we need we're gonna
I'll let you
just
cover
focus
it. Yeah.
on one little tidbit. So he's talking to the electrician, and he's telling them the story of how he came to find the train and what was happening just before, and we learn that he was a cannibal
Yeah.
due to survival, and that he enjoyed eating babies.
Yeah, he's like, I hate that I know what people taste like. And I hate that I know that babies taste best.
And then
uh,
we learned that his sidekick that passed away, that was killed, was the baby.
well, that he was going to eat him. He tells him the story that he was like, you know, he tells it without putting himself into it until the end. But essentially, he says that he was going to eat that kid, and John Hurt instead gave him and his cronies his arm to eat instead. And this, like, changed Chris Evans's character as a person, right?
Yeah,
And,
so
like,
then we that there's like a deeper guilt.
right. So, like, what we assumed was, like, loss of limb from rebellion on John Hurt's part, he actually just, like, cut off to feed Chris Evans and other people. And then they mentioned that the protein bars came shortly after this time. So I guess some of the explanation for the train goes into, like, it was hastily done, and, like, not everything was perfectly in place when they had to start rolling. Because clearly it's like they didn't have the protein bars ready to feed the people in the back of the train, so they were, like, literally cannibalizing each other early on.
So back to the engine room. So
Yeah. So back to the engine room. And there's a really nice shot there where Ed Harris is, like, whispering in his ear over his shoulder, and he's, like, giving him this devil's proposition to, like, take over the train. And he's, like, considering it. And I like this shot where Ed Harris, like, leaves him alone. He, like, backs out, and it shows us from Chris Evans, like, a straight on view, and it's just empty behind him. But then it, like, cuts to behind him, and we see Ed Harris is still in the shot, just, like, ducking out of the corner. Like, there's something about that shot that I really liked, where it's one kind of relating to the space on the train, that they really don't have any privacy. And also just, like, that kind of idea that he's in his headspace in that moment. But right when he's kind of, like, mulling over the decision, the daughter, who is clairvoyant, kind of comes back in with her power again, and, like, starts lifting up the boards of the train, right?
she's there to get the last match, because it turns out that the hoarding of these drugs was not for getting high, although they did. It was to build a bomb to explode the door to get out of the train. And the reason they want to do that is because the electrician was married to the Inuit woman, which was one of the 7 who escaped. And this Inuit, she's, I don't know, Eskimo is the un-PC term now in case you don't know what an Inuit is. And they know snow, like, that's their gig. And so she was teaching him about it, and he deduced that the Earth was getting its climate back.
Yeah, he says that the snow on them has reduced since he last checked it. He's like, I've been checking it, and it's actually gone down. So I think it's getting less cold. It's
Right.
still clearly frozen outside, but he thinks it's getting less cold and potentially survivable. So he wants
Right.
to blow up the door, and then Chris Evans essentially has to choose between blowing up the door and taking over the train from Ed Harris. And it seems like he's about to take over the train.
He pushes the daughter off, and then she like kind of ends up on the floor, and then she kind of has like a panic attack, for lack of better words, and starts digging at the wood. And I was like, is she taking the wood to create fire? Like that's what I thought. But then when she lifts it up, she sees a child in there who basically had replaced a part that had gone extinct.
Yeah, which is a weird thing that like instead of like having a machine shop or something, they're like, we'll just put a kid down there to do this
Do it. So we
function.
find out that it's Timmy.
And it's Timmy, who's small enough at 5 years old to fit into this small space in the engine.
Right. So this situation gets Chris Evans out of this like brainwashing.
Yeah, like we're using the kids. The horror.
So they stop. I don't know. Hold the gears. I don't really know.
They stop the train. And they blow the door as like our villain comes from behind. So there's like a big dramatic climax with like fighting and explosions and the whole shebang. At this point, almost everybody on the train gets killed. Like literally everybody who's still in the back half that they were like trying to save at the beginning of this just like plummets into a ravine. The whole middle of the train is dead. Like maybe the front 3 cars worth of people survive, and they've just been like trashed around in a in like a train accident, essentially. So it goes very poorly for humanity. If the train was designed to like keep genetic diversity around long enough so that people could repopulate and stuff, that plan is out the window with this ending. Because literally like 5 of them are confirmed to survive. It's like Chris Evans, Timmy, the engineer and his daughter, and that's like about it. It's like our heroes who have survived to this point are allowed to live, and maybe a few others. Maybe some of the people at this like rave that was at the front of the train. So they get out, and then it's like they go out in the ice. They've got like some fur coats, and they see a polar bear that has survived, a symbol of survival in harsh environment. So it actually ends on kind of a hopeful note, despite the fact that they've just killed off like everyone on the train.
Which is always an underlying theme, I think, for Bong Joon-ho. He is very like, look at all this darkness in humanity, but there's a little bit of hope.
We'll give you a little glimmer, a little something to live for, So, overall, kind of in summation, I feel like we did like the acting in general. I think Chris Evans is someone we didn't talk about much in terms of performance throughout this, but he does do a very good job. I think he's very grounded throughout. Something I like about him is that he commits to like whatever he's doing. If he's got to be a cocky asshole, he is the cockiest asshole you've ever seen. And if he's got to be a goody two-shoes, he's the goodiest goody two-shoes ever seen. And this is like somewhere in the middle of those two, where he is just like the reluctant leader, and he is just like living and breathing it. And he delivers that end monologue pretty well, especially considering that it's pretty out there in terms of like a monologue, but it sticks with you. I feel like he gives it the right pathos.
After the monologue, I paused it and was like, what the fuck did I just hear? And then like, you process it, and then my actor brain was like, I wouldn't even know how to begin to dissect that section of the monologue.
I know. You just like go to the darkest place you can, I guess. I bought it though, I felt like it was good. Tilda Swinton, she's just so weird. Like, she's the queen of bizarre characters, and she's like, for a comic book adaptation, she is great because she just like is a comic book character. Like, she's always so good. I really liked her. Octavia Spencer, who was kind of coming high, who was like in her peak during this time. This was like after The Help, where she got all of her initial accolades. And like before this current time where she's kind of disappeared more or less.
No,
Um,
she just did the
she did Ma. It was like a horror
oh,
movie.
goodness. Madam C.J. Walker, and
Madam
she
Sejong?
produced it.
Okay, well, okay, all right, I take it back. But I felt like she kind of she's she's not very memorable in this film. Like she's kind of just neutral,
I agree. I
like
agree.
a little bit wasted. When you know what she can
Yeah,
do, she
I
feels a little
agree.
bit wasted.
Agree. She was wasted. I completely agree.
Yeah,
I
like
loved her character.
yeah, like
Loved.
not what's that?
I said I loved her character. I'm more into her character when she passed.
Yeah, she didn't get to make it off, even though her son did. She didn't even get to find out her son was alive.
Yeah.
That's rough. There was also another random dude who was like William Hurt's like bodyguard or something. His name was Earl Grey, and he was just like I don't know some action. So, like he's probably just like a stunt guy, who affects the plot kind of often. He like saves our characters a few times throughout the movie, and he gets killed by the evil villain character. But there's like this character who's like very important, and like we hardly see his face in the movie, and he's got like
Yeah.
no lines, but his actions affected the plot a lot. I thought that was kind of an interesting character,
It was.
right? Because like when he first comes on the scene, he just like parkours his way into a fight scene and just like flying kicks somebody, and you're like, whoa, what the where the hell did this guy come from?
Yeah, I know. I was like, excuse, where did you learn that?
Yeah,
Clearly, he wasn't a train baby.
yeah. I looked him up after the movie, and he's done a number of action oriented projects. So I think he is a stunt guy, like fight choreographer. I didn't look up if he had additional credits on this film, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was like a choreographer on the film. Um, yeah, I think we mentioned most of the other things. I could have picked it apart a little bit more, but I don't think I'm gonna. I feel pretty good about how we went over
We'll
it.
let you make the other decisions on your own, guys.
Yeah, watch the movie. It's a
Yeah.
little cartoony. It's a little silly. It asks you to suspend your uh, your disbelief, but it does have a pretty decent message overall, and it just like has fun, kind of playing with society on a small encapsulated scale, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think it does it better than other movies that try to do the same thing, in terms of just like encapsulating society in a one. We actually did a test episode that, due to some technical issues, will probably never see the light of day. But we did The Platform, which is a film on Netflix with a very similar premise to this. About it.
Big chase.
What's it? I know. Right? And I thought this was like a much better version of that.
I agree. Yeah. Even though the logical leaps were still there, like the way it was done, I was like, I'll buy this. I'll buy this. I'll
Yeah,
buy this.
this
I'll
was
buy this.
entertaining. Oh, I would be remiss if I didn't call out that obnoxious action scene. So there's a moment where they have a gun battle as the train is going around this like spiraling loop.
Oh God, yeah.
And they're like shooting at each other from across different parts of the train, and like it's like, if this is the shot, Chris Evans is like pointing his gun out of a bullet hole like right in front of the screen, and they're somehow like hitting the other window. Like how they can even see each other is a stretch. And then like like trained snipers would have trouble making those kind of shots. Like it just like it bent my brain. I was just like, no.
Yeah.
It was so ridiculous. So there are some like very eye-rolly moments in the film, but if you can get past some of that, I think there's some fun to be had. Should we move on?
right.
Should we move on to next week's film?
Yes. Let's move on to next week's film.
Um,
Oh.
all right. So I put up a post in the Facebook group asking about cult classics. This went back up to an early poll we put up there. So I put up a poll asking what people liked, and Sci-fi was number 1, and that kind of dictated Snowpiercer. And number 2 was cult classics. So I just put up a post being like, what the hell do people consider to be cult classics? Because that term is so broad and like hard to define. It's like it can't be a blockbuster, but basically anything that's has some popularity can kind of qualify as long as it didn't make a lot at the box office. That seems to be the predominant factor. So our pick for next week does come from that chat. So if I post stuff on the group asking you for your opinions, it won't always directly result in something, but it just might. So our film for next week is a cult classic in its theme, and we're going with Christopher Guest's Waiting for Guffman. This was put out...
actually an improv assignment, so that's why I voted for it.
Right. I threw out a few different options to Rochelle, and she was like, oh, my teacher told me to watch that one.
So that's what we're watching.
Yeah, shout out to Rachel Collins for suggesting it. And it was seconded by Jessica Dulio. I hope I said that right.
Hi, Jessica.
So, hi, Rachel.
Yes, hi.
And, there were some honorable mentions. A lot of people talked about Princess Bride. However, the Movie Club Collective podcast covered Princess Bride already in our previous iteration. In fact, with Rachel Collins as our guest. So go back and watch that if you really want to watch an episode about Princess Bride. Since
And
there
if
were...
yeah. Never mind.
Yeah. It was just one that a lot of people were calling out for. But we've already done it, so that's why I didn't go with that one. Otherwise, I probably would have. Some other honorable mentions I saw in there. Rocky Horror Picture Show came up. It's kind of like the original cult horror. I want to thank my friend D for putting up the trailer to Despiser. This is a movie I'd never heard of, but I watched the trailer and it is bonkers. A lot of these movies are kind of inaccessible and people have never heard of. So I tried to go with something that at least I do feel like has a following. And Christopher Guest is definitely a director with a major following. He did other films such as A Mighty Wind and Best in Show. And his line of movies kind of started with Waiting for Guffman. So that's why we're going to do that one next week. Anything else you want to wrap up with?
Just don't forget the name, the fact that we'll be changing the name on Instagram in 12 days now.
Yeah. We'll post about it.
And I'll be posting reminders. Yeah. And then please follow us on Twitter, Views and Paradox.
Yes.
And if you haven't joined the group, join the group. Movies Club Collective on Facebook. This is where a lot of the discussions go down, and you guys like inspire our choices and maybe what we discussed as well. And like our page on Facebook as well.
Yeah, like the page on Facebook. We'll be changing that name shortly as well. And like this video, subscribe if you haven't. So click the bell in the corner so you can get the reminders for when we go live. Because I usually put them up the day of, but you will get a reminder if you click on the bell. At least I believe so.
If you've seen the movie or watched the movie, come back and tell us what you think below.
Yeah, awesome. Let us know if you agreed, if there was something that we missed that you like, that stood out to you about the movie. Feel free to comment. We will check those comments. And I guess that about wraps it up for today. You can find me at John and Paradox. Rochelle, where can they find you?
Instagram at Rochelle Racine, which links down below, or Twitch. No, not Twitch. Oh my God. What's the one? TikTok at Rochelle.
Oh yeah, you've been going crazy on TikTok, right?
It's fun.
I'm
embarrassed, but not.
Right. I've only seen some of them. They're pretty funny though.
Wait till I get to original content. Anyways, guys.
All right.
Thanks for being here.
Until next time, watch more movies.
And happy viewing.
Happy viewing. Oh. All right, bam, ended.
Woo!
All right,